Hello, my name is Mary Angeles, and this video is to show off and explain my clone mechanic. Apologies for having to use text-to-speech. My audio did not want to work with me when trying to voice the video over myself. During this video, you'll also see a trap tile/pressure plate tile I added that only works for the clone. But for the sake of concentrating on the main mechanic, I'll upload a second video explaining how the trap tile works and how to utilize it after this one. This mechanic was inspired by various different games, but the main one was Danger Ducklings, a free Sokoban game you can find on Steam. In this first clip, you can see the basics of how this mechanic works. Once the player steps on the spawner tile, it calls onto a connected clone tile and tells it to spawn in a clone. This clone copies every action the player makes. It will still move if the player is stuck, and vice versa. There can only ever be one clone per level. If this clone is killed, the level treats it as though the player had died. This adds extra challenge, as the player then has to make sure not to let the clone fall into a pit. This clone can be utilized by having it activate other tiles for the player. For this example, the clone activates the trapped pressure plate tile I made in order to open the way for the player. Please note that the clone cannot interact with other entities, as I was unable to get the interactions to work. Now let's go over how this mechanic works. The first thing I did was add a clone entity, which was made to look and act just like the player. It has the exact same code and variables within, making it so that it really does act the exact same way. However, the one added variable for the clone is the start tile. This variable is changed within the clone tile blueprint, saving it as the clone's spawn tile. This was for memory purposes and was originally going to be used for a spawn clone back to start tile feature that was scrapped early on. Originally, I wanted to make the clone movement part of the player controller, but I could never get it to work with me. So in the end, I added code to the player entity that checks if there is a clone present on a map, then moves it at the same time the player entity moves. This boolean is changed by the clone tile to let the player know when a clone has spawned in. The description says, "This is checked when a clone is spawned in order for the player entity to know if there is a clone or not. This boolean is false by default." A second variable that was added was the clone variable. This variable is set by the clone tile once the clone is spawned in. It is used within the clone movement function, which moves the saved clone around. Next we have the spawner tile. This tile reacts when the player or an entity steps on it, and will make a call to the connected clone tile to spawn in a clone. If a clone tile is not set within the details panel, it will not work and will instead send a warning in-game to let the developer know. If a clone tile is set, the spawner will cast to the player entity and check to see if there is already a clone set. If there is already a clone, nothing will happen as only one clone can be used at once. If there is no clone, then the spawner tells the clone tile to spawn the clone in, then sets the player entity's clone exists boolean to true to make sure no other clones can be added. The only unique variable here is the clone tile variable, which as stated before, has to be set within the details panel. Lastly, we have the clone tile. This is the tile where the clone will spawn. The first thing it does is make sure a spawner has been set. If not, it will send in a warning within the game for the developer. If there is a spawner is connected, the tile sets its spawn clone event dispatcher. This event plays a sound first before spawning in a single clone entity. Its spawn transform and scale both come from the tile itself, but its rotation is set to match the player's entity. It also sets the clone's current tile variable. Once the clone is spawned, the tile is told that it now has an entity on it. Its clone spawned boolean is set to true, and the tile saves the clone as its spawned clone. The clone's start tile is also set, although this variable was for a scrapped feature. It is still saved just in case. Finally, a cast to the player is made, and the new clone is set as to its clone variable. The tile has three unique variables. The first one is the tile clone, which is set to be the spawned clone. The second one is a boolean that checks if a clone is spawned that starts off as false. This boolean was used for debugging, and can be safely ignored or removed. The last one is the connected spawner tile, which must be set within the details panel in the editor to work. That is all that needs to be known about the clone mechanic. If there is something you do not understand or something you believed I missed, feel free to reach out to me. And if you want to know about the trapped pressure plate, I'll be uploading a video on it later. I will link it in the description of this video once it's uploaded. Thank you for watching.